Good evening, good afternoon, good morning to all of you tuning in from around the world and all of you watching on the replay. I hope you're all staying healthy and happy. My name is Luke. I'm a producer here at How To Academy, and welcome to what I'm sure is going to be an absolutely brilliant event. Today, we are very lucky to be joined by best-selling author and behavioral investigator, Vanessa Van Edwards. For more than a decade, Vanessa has led corporate workshops for the world's largest companies, including Amazon, Microsoft, Comcast, and Nike. Her own company, Science of People, has been profiled by Entrepreneur Magazine, USA Today, CNN, CBS, amongst many others, and her new book, Cues, Small Signals, Incredible Impact, is out now. And that, of course, is why you are all here today, to learn from an expert about the body language and verbal signals that influence your conversation, relationship, and how you're perceived in the world. So after a 40 to 50 minute or so lecture, Vanessa will take questions from you, the audience, so please type them wherever your Q&A box is on your screen, and I promise I'll get to them a little bit later. Well, that's more than enough from me, so without further ado, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Vanessa Van Edwards. Vanessa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Luke. Oh, I'm so honored and excited to be here. And we're talking about a big topic today. So when we're diving in, we're going to be talking about how to make an amazing impression at work. And here's the good news, is there's some side benefits. It's not only coming across well, very charismatic, very warm, very competent at work, it also happens in other areas of your life too. So socially, professionally, even romantically. So let's actually dive in. And the very most important thing you should know about me, and all other than what Luke just mentioned in that amazing intro, is I'm also a recovering awkward person. So when it comes to social information, I've always had trouble processing social information, reading cues. Here's my very bad pun for the evening. I used to call myself a social vegan. I avoid meat. I don't know if loving puns contributes to my awkwardness. Maybe there's a little bit of a cycle there. So the reason I share this is because so often people skills or social skills or communication guides and manuals are written by extroverts, are written by people who have a natural affinity for people skills. I've had to learn them from scratch. I'm hoping that today I can teach you some blueprints that you can use, whether you're a recovering awkward person, an introvert, an ambivert, or an extrovert. This whole journey started for me from a very personal place. I was wondering what makes people charismatic. And a few years into doing research, we stumbled across an interesting pattern. What we did is we asked people in our lab, who is the most charismatic person you know? You just think about that for a second in your head. Think about the most charismatic person you know. What we found is that most people can very, very quickly answer that question. They can say, oh yes, my boss or my best friend or my teacher or my dad. The next question is where it got more interesting. The next question we asked was, what is charisma? And this time people had a really hard time answering. In fact, it took them an average of 15 seconds to answer that question. And we realized this very interesting pattern that charisma is one of the few traits that we know the moment we see it, yet we have a really hard time defining it. And so I wanted to know, what does the research have to say about charisma? Can we define charisma? And more importantly, can we learn it? And luckily, thank goodness for us, there are a few naturally born charismatic people who are just born with great hand gestures right out the womb. But most of us, most charismatic people actually cultivate their charisma, that we can develop this trait. So here's what the research found. This is from Dr. Susan Fisk from Princeton University. What she found is that highly charismatic people, they rank high in two traits. That what differentiates highly charismatic people from others is that they have the perfect balance of warmth and competence. That specifically, these are the traits we are most interested in whenever we're interacting with someone. The reason for this is because highly charismatic people, they rank off the charts in both warmth and competence. So at the same time, they're trustworthy and they're friendly and they're likable, they're open, they're collaborative, but they're also capable and efficient and productive. We see them as powerful and impressive. That highly charismatic people are able to hit this sweet spot. They're off the charts in both of these traits. This completely blew my mind. When Dr. Fisk looked at how much these matter, how much these traits matter, she found that 82% of our judgments of people are based on these two traits. Now that's incredible, because when you ask someone, how do you want to come across? You hear all different kinds of words, from funny to likable to charismatic. But actually, when it boils down to it, when we are interacting with someone else, these are the two traits we are looking for. So this is what I broke down in my book, and I have both the international cover and the US cover. I know we have people from all over the world. That's why I have this background for you. Let me just start with the basics. So how we decide if someone is charismatic is based on their cues. Cues, very simply, are the social signals humans send to each other. And we do this through different channels. So when we think about our communication, we do it through our nonverbal, so our body language, our facial expressions, our gestures, our posture. We do it through our words, of course, the words we use. We also do it through our vocal patterns, so our volume, our pace, our cadence. And the very last chapter of the book is on imagery, so the colors we wear, the props we use, the symbols we use. The reason why this is important is because most of us tend to put all of our energy into the verbal basket. We go to an interview, or we prep for a meeting, or we think about a presentation, and we script out the perfect answers. The problem is that's only one channel. In fact, that's actually the smaller channel when we're looking at nonverbal and vocal. And so what I want to talk about today is what are the cues that can help us leverage our charisma? How can we send both warm and competent cues? I have a metaphor for you. I love a good metaphor. So here's a metaphor for cues. And this is really important for very, very smart people. I find that very, very smart people, in fact, the smarter the person, the more they struggle with charisma. And the reason for this is because very smart people have incredible ideas. They think very clearly, they think ahead, they think strategically, they think creatively. And so they think, okay, if I have a great idea, I'm going to rely on my idea. I don't need to be charismatic. My idea can get wherever I want to go. The way that I like to think about it is if your ideas are the car, your cues are the gas. Or if you have an electric car, your cues are the juice. That cues are what get your ideas to the right places. Your cues are what give your ideas fuel so that they're actually gotten, taken in, bought, observed, and paid attention to. And so when we talk about having good ideas, we have to be able to have cues to send them. I want to break this down into a little science for us. So this research actually comes from Dr. Susan Fisk. I broke it down a little bit to simplify it for us. What we're talking about, that balance of warmth and competence, is that star zone, what I like to call the charisma zone, that when people rank off the charts in warmth and competence, they hit that sweet spot of being both likable and powerful. The problem is that most of us have an imbalance. The reason why we're so interested in highly charismatic people is not many of us can hit that sweet spot. And most people are a little higher in warmth or a little higher in competence. And what I've found is this is the cause of most of our people problems, that when we think about how we're communicating with others, how we have to make a good impression at work, it's actually the imbalance that's causing most of our miscommunications. Here, let me break down how this works. So as I go, I'm going to go through each of the 4 sections of the charisma zone, of the charisma scale. I want you to think about where you fall. So which sounds more like you? So as I mentioned, the charisma zone, that sweet spot, is that perfect balance of being both likable and taken seriously. For people who are higher in warmth, for people who lean a little bit higher on the warm side. So my warm folks, you are collaborators. You love to encourage people. You're great team players. Highly warm folks, you know if you're highly warm if people love telling you their life story. If everyone comes to you for advice, if you're highly warm, you struggle with the problem, which is that people verbal vomit on you. Right? They just tell you everything. And that's because highly warm people, they are cueing, they are signaling openness and warmth and trust. And so people come to them with that warmth and trust. The problem is, for all the great things that collaboration does, all that wonderful things that trust does, if we don't have enough competence cues, people don't take us seriously. So highly warm folks often struggle with people pleasing. They might struggle with people interrupting them or not taking their ideas seriously. So they're very liked, but they're not always respected. A couple other things that we can think about with high warmth. Gotta use a funny GIF. So not always, but often my warm folks are huggers. Not always, but often. They're usually very encouraging. They can sometimes, not always, be the cheerleader of the office. That's because highly warm people are supporters. They are collaborators. Let's talk about high competence. So high competent folks, they are taken very seriously. People think of them as very smart, as very capable, as very impressive. The problem is that if you have a lot of competence and you don't have enough of those warmth cues, people see you as cold. intimidating or hard to talk to. So people might take your ideas very seriously, but they might have trouble opening up to you. They might have trouble letting you in on their worries or their fears. So highly competent folks have this unique problem where they're taken almost too seriously, in the fact that people find that intimidating. A couple other symptoms of high competence here, which I think are just so funny. So by the way, if you're highly competent, or you're with a highly competent person if they Google fact check you. So highly competent people, they love data, they love facts, they love research, they love getting it right. And so if you say something, they'll be like, wait a second, let me just check that for a second. Yeah, Google says that's correct. Google says that's correct. So that's a highly competent person. They love data, they love facts. They also want to know exactly what's required of them. So highly competent people typically love an agenda. They love to stick to the agenda. They hate getting a meeting and having it go off agenda because they want to get it done. Neither of these approaches are right or wrong, warm versus competent, but they are different, right? A highly warm person wants to go into a meeting and they want to bond, they want to connect, they want to make sure everyone's on the same page. That's their main priority. A highly competent person wants to get it done. They want to get the agenda done, they want to get the task done. And so if you have two people in the same meeting who have these competing interests, that's how you get people who get frustrated. That's how we end up having some miscommunications or people problems. This is the most important thing that high competent folks have to know. Dr. Fisk found that highly competent people, if they don't have enough warmth, it leaves people feeling suspicious. In other words, no matter how good your idea is, no matter how well researched you are, if you have competence without enough warmth, people don't believe your competence. That highly charismatic people, the reason why they're so effective and so successful is because they package their very competent ideas with facts and data, but they also surround it with warmth and trust and likability. The last area here is really important. I call it the danger zone. The danger zone, this is where I was for many, many years. The danger zone happens when we don't cue enough of either warmth or competence. And this is another issue if you have any kind of social anxiety or if you're a recovering awkward person like me, which is if we don't know how to send the right cues, we tend to under-signal. And we under-signal, the problem is people can't get a grasp on either our warmth or competence and they doubt us. And this is very clear. What the research found is that under-signaling causes people to doubt, dismiss, and underestimate us. That is because cues are an essential part of how people are believing us, understanding us, and trusting our behavior. And so under-signalers, we don't signal enough of warmth or competence. And I think that sometimes the tendency, especially professionally, is to go mute, is to go stoic, is to hide your cards and show as little expressiveness as possible. The problem is muting is in itself a cue. That when we mute or go stoic, people also recognize that. And typically people recognize that as nervousness or deception. Even if you're not nervous and even if you're not deceiving anyone, we know that liars, typically, not always, liars often mute themselves. Whenever we did some research on poker for the book, and we noticed that a lot of the times when people have a good or bad hand, poker players tend to mute. They tend to undersignal because they don't want one cue to give them away. And so we sense that when someone mutes or goes stoic or underexpresses, they're hiding something. And that makes us very, very nervous. So here's what I want to do. I want to do our first activity. So you're welcome to draw this if you're a visual person, or you're just welcome to think about this in your head. I want you to place yourself on the charisma scale. So where do you think you fall? Do you think you hit that sweet spot? You think you're warm, higher in competence? And for our purposes, we're talking about professionally at work. You can also, if you want extra credit points, any of my extra credit learners, you're welcome to create a professional one and a social one. Sometimes we're more competent at work, but we're warmer with our family and friends. So I want you to think about just first is, where are you professionally? Where do you think people perceive you? And what's most important about this is if someone were to describe you after meeting you at work, or having a client or a colleague describe you, where would they place you on the scale? Because sometimes how we are is different from how we come across. This was a huge problem that I had. As an awkward person, I felt like I had good ideas, but I had no idea how to share them. I really desperately wanted to connect with people, but I had no idea how. So I want you to think about, how do you come across? How would other people describe you? Next challenge here, and this is where things get interesting, is I want you to think about the 5 people you interact with the most. This can be people at work, but also people who affect your day. So this could be a parent, a child, a partner, a colleague, a client, a boss. And I want you to place them on the scale. What's interesting about this exercise is you might notice that either you group yourself around very similar people. So sometimes warm people hang out with all warm people, or a team that does really well, they're all in one part of the scale. Or you might notice the people you struggle with, the people you have miscommunications with, or you feel like, we just can't get on the same page. Maybe they're in an opposite side of the scale as you. This is a very easy and quick way to diagnose where important people are in your life and how we can begin to honor where they fall. Here's what's incredible about this research, and this was my secret mission for today, is I not only want to teach you how to create an incredible impression at work, I also want you to think about how you can inspire others to show up as their best selves at work. What the research shows is that our charisma is contagious. When we show up as our warmest, most competent self, it triggers others to be their warmest and most competent self. And so my bonus here is that we can be more positively contagious, which we need more than ever, by sharing really positive, warm, and competent cues. I want to start off with vocal power. So this is the mode of communication I think people forget about. I think we know about our words. We sometimes think about our nonverbal. We very rarely think about our vocal charisma. And there's 2 chapters and cues on this. They're actually my longest chapters because vocal power holds so much that we don't realize. So here was one of my favorite studies, and they did this with doctors. They wanted to know if we judge a doctor based on warmth and competence, and if that matters for how they practice. Doctors are a very interesting case study because they are pretty universally seen as smart. They had to get through a certain amount of schooling to become a doctor. And so they wonder, well, does warmth really matter? And how much does it matter? So here's what they did. They asked doctors to record 10-second voice tone clips. So in these clips, the doctors had to say their name, where they worked, and their specialty. So it sounded like this. I'm going to use my daughter's ribbon dancer as a microphone. So here's what they did. So they would record a clip and it would sound like this. Hi, my name is Dr. Edwards. I specialize in oncology and I work at Children's Presbyterian Hospital. So they took a clip like this and they warbled the words. So you could hear the volume, the pace, the cadence, but not the actual words being said. So the clips after being warbled sounded like something like that. They took these clips and they asked participants to rate them on warmth and competence, the 2 things that we know are most important for charisma. Now imagine this for a second. You're given a clip of gobbledygook and you're asked, how smart is this person? Do you like this person? What's incredible is the doctors who had the lowest warmth and competence ratings also had the highest rate of malpractice lawsuits. In other words, we don't just sue doctors based on their skills. We sue doctors based on our perception of their skills. And that happens the moment we first hear them. Why? What research has found is that we can hear a lot about someone's trust and someone's relaxation from their voice. So for example, when we're really tense, that actually changes the way that our voice sounds. So what were the patterns? Why was it that some doctors ranked off the charts in warmth and competence where others don't? Here was the first big pattern. The doctors who used the question inflection were rated as low in both warmth and competence. So the question inflection is when we go up at the end of our sentence. So we're talking and we go up as if we're asking everything we're saying, but we're not actually asking. So their clips, those clips sounded like this. Hi, my name is Dr. Edwards. I specialize in oncology and I work at Children's Presbyterian Hospital. The problem is when we hear the question inflection on a statement, it actually changes where our brain is listening. They've actually studied how people listen to a question inflection and when they're in an MRI machine. What they found is that when we hear the question inflection mistakenly or accidentally used on a statement, our brain goes from just listening to scrutinizing. The reason for this is because liars typically ask their lie. It also is a very clear signal of low competence or low confidence. That if you're asking what you're saying, should we ask what you're saying? So in our lab, we did a lot of lie detection research for the book, which was super fun. Basically, I got people to submit themselves lying on video, and then we coded the videos for patterns. A very clear pattern emerged, which was that when people lied, they asked it. When they played two truths and a lie, so two truths and a lie is when we have two truths and one lie. When we asked people to play that game with us, they would often ask the lie. So they would say, I'm from Los Angeles, I love dogs, and I'm a vegetarian. That is because liars are subtly and subconsciously asking, do you believe me? And so we know this as listeners that when we hear the question inflection, we go, wait a minute, why did they ask that? This is particularly important on important information, sales, prices, and timelines. So I do a lot of sales trainings, and the biggest mistake I hear is that people ask their number. So they'll be on the phone like this. So they'll be doing a sales pitch and it's going really well. And they're in a really, really good tone. They're not hitting any question inflection. They get to their number and they ask it. So it sounds like this. Yeah, hi, we'd love to work with you. We'd love to have your business. And the cost of our business is $5,000. When you ask your number or your price or your timeline, you are telling someone, I don't really believe this number. And so you should question it too. When you ask things, you get more doubt, you get more disbelief, you get people who question and scrutinize and wonder. And we give this away often accidentally. So that was the first one. I want you to make sure, and we're going to have some action steps in a second. Check your voicemail. Are you accidentally using the question inflection? In the first 10 words you say in a meeting, on a video call, on a phone call, are you asking? Are you saying, hey, everyone, good morning. Today, we're going to go over a few updates, and then we're going to talk about things together. When you ask, you are telling people, I'm not so sure about what I'm going to say in this meeting, and you shouldn't be either. So make sure that you're using a neutral inflection and only use the question inflection when you're asking.